So, what if our whole political system has a fundamental design flaw? And I'm not talking about who we elect, but where we actually discuss what's right and wrong. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating proposal that argues our biggest, thorniest ethical debates are, well, homeless. And that really is the central question, isn't it? I mean, we all expect our government to be ethical, right? But have we ever actually designed a place for ethics to live inside the system? As it stands, those huge conversations don't really have a home. They just kind of show up uninvited whenever there's a crisis. I'm sure you've seen this play out. A controversial new bill appears. It's something that just makes people feel a little uncomfortable, you know? It might be about some new technology or our rights or the very future of our society. And you can just feel the public concerns starting to bubble up. So where does all that concern and debate end up? Yep, you guessed it, the House of Lords. And it's not because the Lords was ever designed for this role. It's just there's literally nowhere else for these big, thorny ethical questions to go. So you get these respected figures speaking up, maybe some amendments get smuggled in, and for a brief, shining moment, it becomes the stage for the nation's conscience. But then what happens? The moment passes. The bill gets passed or changed or just dropped. The media finds its next story, and that intense ethical spotlight, it just fades to black. Everything goes quiet, waiting to be rediscovered all over again from scratch the next time a big controversy erupts. That right there is the cycle of forgetting that this whole proposal is trying to break. So, this brings us right to the heart of the problem, the core diagnosis, if you will. The idea that ethics in our government is, for all intents and purposes, homeless. Let's unpack what that really means. And this is the key quote, really. The system just doesn't give ethical reasoning a permanent home. Think about it like this. Right now, ethics is just a visitor in our political house. It only shows up when there's an emergency, like a fire alarm going off. It doesn't have its own room. You know, there's no space set aside for it to be considered thoughtfully and consistently. It's treated like an afterthought, not a built-in feature. Okay, so what would a permanent home for ethics actually look like? Well, it'd be a stable, recognized place in the system where these questions aren't just a surprise, they're expected. A place where we could discuss the ethical side of things openly, instead of in these rushed, frantic debates. And maybe most importantly, it would be a place that builds an institutional memory, so the lessons and the reasoning from one debate actually get carried forward to the next. Now, here's a really important point. This is not a dig at politicians' personal morality. The argument here isn't that they don't care about ethics. No, it's a critique of the design of the whole system. The system itself is what treats ethics like an emergency guest that you have to find a spare room for, instead of a permanent, valued member of the family. All right, so before we start sketching out what this home for ethics could actually be, we need to be super clear about what it isn't. Because if we don't set these boundaries, it's really easy to fall into some common traps. First off, this is not about creating some kind of supreme moral court that hands down verdicts from on high. It's also not about telling our elected representatives what to believe or how to vote. And it is definitely not some preachy, symbolic exercise. I mean, the absolute last thing anyone needs is another body claiming it has all the moral answers, right? Okay, so if that's what we're not doing, what would a better way for handling ethics in government look like? Let's get into the positive vision. Well, the focus would be on improving the process. It's about creating a dedicated space where ethical questions get raised deliberately, not just by accident during some heated debate. It would be a place to explore the long-term consequences, to think in decades, not just election cycles. A place where different value systems, religious, non-religious, all of them are actually heard. And get this, disagreement isn't just tolerated, it's expected and brought to the surface. And the best part? All that reasoning would be visible to everyone. And this is maybe the most important part. This new body wouldn't have any power to block laws, no vetoes. Its influence would come from something else entirely, something more subtle, but maybe even more powerful, pure clarity. Its job would be to make the ethical dimensions of a decision so crystal clear that they become impossible for politicians and for us, the public, to ignore. Okay, this all leads to a really obvious question, right? If the House of Lords is already the place where these debates happen, why not just make it official? Why not just formalize the role there? I mean, on the surface, it seems like the simplest solution. Just give the Lords an official ethical review job. But the argument we're exploring today suggests this would actually just trap us in the exact same problems we started with. And you can see the core trade-off right here. When ethics is in the Lords, it's always tangled up with all these other issues. Questions about its democratic legitimacy, accusations of it just being used to delay and obstruct, the focus gets messy. But a separate body, well, it would be unburdened by all that baggage. It could have a single, laser-like focus on ethics, and it could be consistent, building up that institutional memory over time. So the point is, separating ethics isn't a downgrade. It's actually the opposite. It's about giving ethics an upgrade, giving it a clearer shape, a stronger voice, and a real, defined purpose in our national conversation. So if it's not the House of Lords, then what are we talking about? Let's try to sketch out what this new kind of body could look like. First things first, this is not a second House of Lords, not a replacement, not a competitor. It would have a completely different job to do. And it's not a rival to Parliament either. Its whole purpose would be to inform our democracy, not to override it. And finally, let's be really clear. It is not a moral court. It wouldn't be handing down verdicts. Its real job would be inquiry, reflection, and, that word again, clarification. So what could it be then? Well, something pretty modest, actually. Something focused. Think of a standing body whose whole job is to examine the ethical dimensions of big policy choices. It would need to reflect our pluralistic society and be a place to think in decades, not election cycles. And its final product? To be an advisory voice that feeds all that careful, considered reasoning back into the democratic process for our elected reps to use. So in the end, we're not left with a perfect blueprint, but with a really powerful starting point for a bigger conversation. The proposal is really a question for all of us. If we agree that our political system desperately needs a permanent home for ethics, what do we think that home should actually look like?